Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Well, greetings, friends, and welcome to this February 23rd, 2013 edition of Nightcast. Tonight in the news, the main story for today is coming from the Ukraine. Ukraine's members of parliament have voted to appoint their speaker as the interim president following the disappearance on Saturday of Viktor Yanukovych.
The people control Independence Square now. There has been no let-up in the protests, despite the dizzying pace of change of the last few days. A reminder that their objective has not yet been achieved, and of the many that have already paid the ultimate price. On Sunday morning, Parliament met, in a week in which it had voted to remove the president, Viktor Yanukovych, and release a major opposition leader from jail. This time, it voted overwhelmingly to temporarily hand over the duties of the president to the speaker. So, meet Alexander Turchinov, the man Parliament now regards as the acting head of state. He says a new government will be set up.
Parliament cannot substitute for the executive power. Parliament has its own tasks according to the Constitution. So our priority now is to get the executive working again, to ensure that we move towards a national government by Tuesday. Let's agree the Coordination Council will start their work at 11 tomorrow.
Parliament has also decided that Viktor Yanukovych's opulent residence should be handed over to the state. Mr. Yanukovych rejects all this. He says the Parliament doesn't have the right to remove him as president, and he still has the support of large numbers of Ukrainians, particularly in the east, and probably of Russia too. But his exact whereabouts are not known, even to the opposition.
Millions of Ukrainians want to know where is Yanukovych and try to find him. He disappeared. President of Ukraine disappeared. That's why we have to elect a new one.
In less than a week, Ukraine has moved from its bloodiest day of unrest to peace deals with an embattled president to his disappearance from the capital. Activists have now replaced guards outside official buildings. Protesters celebrate in streets once held by riot police, while the president's luxury retreat has been opened up to ordinary Ukrainians. One of his arch rivals is free from jail. After days of turbulence, everyone is praying for a peaceful end to this crisis. James Cocknell, BBC News.
Thank you, James. And friends, closed-circuit television shows Yanukovych fleeing.
The BBC can't independently verify this footage, but video has emerged which appears to show President Yanukovych's entourage fleeing from his luxurious mansion outside Kiev.
Okay, Yanukovych, that is. All right, already he's fleeing, and I lost the ability to pronounce his name suddenly. A Ukrainian television station broadcast that unverified footage of what it claimed showing Viktor Yanukovych and his advisors fleeing the presidential compound by helicopter. That was just yesterday. Now, and it had that designation, if you want a little bit of detail on that, the local newspaper, Kyiv Weekly, reported that a helicopter with this designation of AW-139 had been leased by the Ukrainian government. Now, more on this story. Orthodox church-goer fears ethnic conflict. In the center of Kiev is one of the biggest and oldest Orthodox Christian monasteries in the former Soviet Union, the Monastery of the Caves. Many Orthodox churches maintain close ties with Russia, and the monastery is no exception. A significant part or center of pilgrimage, it's used mainly by Russian speakers and ethnic Russians. The BBC's Olga Ivshina reports.
Many Orthodox churches in Ukraine still have close spiritual relations to Moscow. For example, this one, Kiev Monastery of the Caves. And today here there is a special service for the establishment of peace in Ukraine. Most of the people who come here are Russian speakers, so now many of them are very much concerned about their future.
I'm from southern Ukraine, and I know the mood there. Ethnic conflict now seems inevitable. The opposition and everybody in western Ukraine think they're right and everybody else is wrong.
I hope the situation calms down so we can go about our daily business without any fear.
Why are we worried? I live in Lviv, but I'm a Russian speaker. I've come here to pick up my daughter. I'm frightened about the future.
Monks here told us that they're praying for all those killed in Kiev in recent days, and they are hoping that peace now will last for long.
And friends, the parliament of the Ukraine has voted to seize President Yanukovych's luxury estate near Kiev, which protesters entered on Saturday. The BBC's Gabriel Gatehouse visited the retreat and described seeing tennis courts, a boxing ring, and the presidential sauna.
Well, guess what's in here? It's a boxing ring. Ironic, really, considering that one of the men responsible for ousting President Yanukovych is Vitaly Klitschko, the former boxing heavyweight champion. Anyway, just to give you an idea of what else is here, that over there is the tennis court. If I then point you over to the left, you'll see that huge wooden building. Now that seems to be the primary residence. The protesters are keeping a guard at the front door. They're not allowing anyone in. They say they think it might be booby-trapped, and they're getting some specialists in to check it out. But anyway, we've had a look through the window, and it's incredibly opulent. There's gold and chandeliers and marble everywhere. Now, come forward a bit, and you'll see across the grounds and that ornamental pond over there in the distance, another wooden building. Welcome to the presidential sauna. Come with me. So this here is the ante-room, the lobby, if you like. As you can see, nice comfortable sofas, big television. If President Yanukovych were here, he'd be able to watch his own downfall on the television before continuing on through his nice wooden log cabin to the plunge pool. Just one moment. Just let me show you the plunge pool here. Nice and warm for this weather. The water is lovely. Of course, nice mosaic on the sides. Massage table over here to get rid of the stresses of the day. The towels in the shape of swans. Just give us one more moment, if you would, sir. I'll just show you, if I can, come with me, the presidential toilet. Switch the light on. In you go. Gold taps. It seems to have been abandoned in a bit of a hurry. There's some hairbrushes and combs there on the side. All in immaculate opulence, of course. Nice soft towels. And these, the buckets that you use to throw over yourself after you've sweated it out in the sauna. The sauna room's just in there. It's a little bit dark. Some of the people now strolling round this house, these grounds, are saying, look at where all our money went. Look at the corruption. We want a better life.
And, friends, more on this story from the Ukraine. People in Kiev's Independence Square have been talking about their hopes for the future of the Ukraine. It comes after a weekend of fast-moving developments following the deaths of protesters last week. Parliament in Ukraine has named its speaker as interim president. a man who was freed from jail on Saturday, has ruled out becoming prime minister again. In an address on Saturday, President Yanukovych refused to officially step down.
Like what's happening during the last couple of days, it just seems like some dreams comes true, but whether they'll actually help to bring these dreams into life. And obviously Ukraine will come, even if the government works well at the moment, still it has to work really, really hard to just improve the economical situations and to do changes which will affect people's life in the country.
I think the time has come when our country will truly live in a new way, when democracy will prevail and we'll set an example for the whole world.
I really hope there will be positive changes. I cannot be 100% sure. I don't see a leader, a strong leader who would be able to unite both Western and Eastern Ukraine, and who will be professional enough to make the changes that people were standing here for.
I think everything will be fixed. There won't be such a mess. Khreshchatyk Street will be rebuilt and reconstructed. The chestnut will blossom. People will return home. The government will make right laws. Corruption will be removed from this country.
What
has changed is people's self-consciousness. Ukrainians are very patient. They can bear it till the very end, as long as I'm not touched. If I am not hurt, then I can ignore. But this has changed already. People realise themselves as a nation. They realise that they can influence events and change their lives.
Люди осознали себя народом, осознали себя нацией, осознали себя, что они могут влиять на события и на свою жизнь.
И очень тяжело, вроде как мы победили, первая победа есть.
It's very difficult. Although we won, we have the first victory. I think it's not complete. We need to change the system because our society is very ill.
К сожалению, мы очень больны, наше общество очень больно.
Now, before fleeing yesterday, dear friends, President Yanukovych slammed the state coup.
Я не собираюсь подавать в отставку. Я законно избранный президент.
I'm not going to leave the country. I'm not going to resign. I'm a legitimately elected president. I've been given guarantees by all the international mediators with whom I worked. They've given security guarantees. I'll see how they're going to play this part. Everything that's taking place today is to a large extent vandalism and banditry and a state coup.
Все, что сегодня происходит, в большей степени, это, конечно, и вандализм, и бандитизм, и государственный переворот. Это не оппозиция, это бандиты. Все, что происходит в парламенте, на выходе из парламента...
This is no opposition. They're bandits. Everything that's taking place in Parliament, outside of the Parliament building, lawmakers are beaten, stones are thrown at them, they are threatened. All the resolutions that they're adopting are illegal. They should hear about this and hear this from me. I will not sign anything with the bandits who are today terrorizing the entire country, the Ukrainian people, disgracing Ukraine.
Всю страну, украинский народ. Позорят Украину. Мы видим повтор нацистский.
What we're seeing is a repeat of the Nazi precedent, when in the 1930s Nazis came to power in Germany and Austria. This is a repeat of that. Parties were banned, same as now. They're banning the Communist Party, they're banning the Party of Regions. They're attaching labels, persecuting, harassing and beating people, burning houses, offices. More than 200 offices of the Party of Regions have been burned down in Ukraine.
Офисы. Более 200 офисов партии регионов сожгли в Украине.
And friends, Daniel Sanford now has a report from Kharkiv in the eastern part of Ukraine, where the city's pro-Russian mayor was, among other things, he was also prevented from entering the city council building by anti-government protesters.
A moment of extreme tension today in Kharkiv. The pro-Russian mayor had tried to get to the city council, only to find his way blocked by revolutionaries in balaclavas. He pleaded with them to remove their masks and go home, but in the end, he was the one who had to leave. Behind him, his supporters could barely contain their anger. Last night, revolutionaries were beaten back as they tried to attack a giant statue of Lenin. Here in the east, many people look to Moscow as much as to Kiev. At the city's Orthodox cathedral, prayers this morning after the bloodshed last week. The people here speak Russian and are deeply uncomfortable about the Ukrainian nationalism of the revolutionaries in Kiev.
Yesterday, the leader of Svoboda party said he wanted to outlaw the Russian language. Maybe they will come up with some radical ways of making us non-citizens.
All day, anti-revolutionaries have guarded the statue of Lenin. When this crowd watched events in Kiev last week, they didn't think of a glorious new future for Ukraine. They remembered the dark days when some Western Ukrainians collaborated with the Nazis. But I asked Olga Melnikova, what do they think now of President Yanukovych, who may be hiding in Kharkiv?
Of course, if I had to choose between Yanukovych and those people in Kiev, of course I will vote for Yanukovych, because I don't want war here, I don't want people killing people. But if I can choose anybody, I'm sorry, definitely I would not vote for Yanukovych, because he didn't do much good for our nation.
The divisions in Ukraine were being played out in public on this city's streets today. After the bloodshed and destruction, there is raw anger on both sides. Daniel Sanford, BBC News, Kharkiv.
Thank you, Daniel. And Gavin Hewitt has a report, friends, that will kind of sum this up, and then we'll go on to a few other stories tonight. Ukraine's interim president has given members of parliament 2 days to form a new government following the disappearance of Viktor Yanukovych. Opposition protesters in Kiev have maintained their presence in Independence Square. Here's Gavin Hewitt reporting from Kiev.
In their tens of thousands, Ukrainians today came to walk past the barricades to see for themselves where the street battles had been fought and to lay flowers. The president may have left the capital, but many are still uncertain of victory.
And at the moment, do you think you've won a victory here?
No. We've won a battle.
Not yet. The people who are killing our people are still at large.
The big question now is who is in charge of this country. Kiev is a capital with almost no police visible.
This is a key government building. The group here comes from a city outside of Kiev. Move a few paces, here is another group from a completely different city. How do they coordinate? Well, very informally. But this, at the moment, passes for law and order.
This is Lukyanitska, the city's main prison. We found the gates controlled by a group of nationalist protesters. They say there are political prisoners inside, but they also fear other groups might attempt a jailbreak.
Yesterday, the prisoners complained about treatment from the prison officers. Some activists wanted to free them, but this has to be done in an orderly way.
During the night, a few traffic police did appear, but fearful of being attacked, they were escorted by protesters from the self-defense committees that have sprung up. There is a vacuum of power here. Parliament has begun the urgent task of trying to set up a national unity government. MPs voted for the Speaker, Alexander Turchinov, to become interim president until elections in May. He said, "We are ready for a dialogue with Russia, but which takes into account Ukraine's European choice." Opposition politicians have asked the crowds to stay on the streets. They were there in vast numbers today. They remain wary of ousted President Viktor Yanukovych, whose whereabouts are unknown.
Millions of Ukrainians want to know where is Yanukovych and try to find him. He disappeared. President of Ukraine disappeared.
CCTV footage has emerged which seems to show President Yanukovych's entourage fleeing his residence by helicopter on Friday night. In the capital, there is enormous hope, but fears too about stability. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, Kiev.
And friends, today could mark a real change in something. I'll comment more on that after this story. The last surviving member of the Trapp Family Singers, whose story inspired the musical and Oscar-winning film The Sound of Music, has died at age 99. Maria von Trapp died peacefully at her home in Vermont in the United States, where her family settled after escaping Nazi-occupied Austria before World War II. Russell Trott reports.
The story of the von Trapp family and their governess became a 20th century classic, made famous by the Oscar-winning film starring Julie Andrews. It was also a massive hit on Broadway.
Let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start.
The musical family's escape from Austria and the Nazis, 7 children of a widower whose teacher falls in love with them and him.
Do, re, mi.
The real-life Maria, called Louisa in the film, was the second eldest daughter of Captain von Trapp. She travelled with her talented singing family throughout Europe, performing concert tours before moving to America. In an interview 4 years ago, Maria returned to the family home, the Villa Trapp, which was later turned into a hotel. She spoke of her affection for the film.
I like The Sound of Music very much. I think it's a beautiful story, and you can take the children there. There's no violence, and it's only, really happy family what we were. But the only thing is my father was different, he was a very loving father, and music was in our house all the time.
The von Trapps eventually settled in Vermont, where they opened a ski lodge. Her half-brother described Maria as a lovely woman whose memory will live on in the minds of the public and her family. Russell Trott, BBC News.
And friends, with the death of Maria von Trapp, it could be a indication of a change in the world from here out. As we look at our chart from Revelation, we see the next seal that's to open up. We've had the first 4 seals operating, the 4 horses of the apocalypse, the 4 horses of Revelation, the white, red, black, and pale horse. Next seal is the 5th seal. The prelude music to the 5th seal has begun to play. And with the death of Maria von Trapp, it's almost like a signal that the sound of music for the world may be coming to an end. And we're going to be keeping, and as the rest of the stories today, Ukraine is not the only one that's been a city with a lot of protest going on. We'll show you 2 or 3 more stories in the time we have remaining tonight to show you how mobs and sedition and internal strife is going on elsewhere around the world, not just the Ukraine. In the Thailand crisis, there was a deadly blast today in Bangkok.
One grenade fired into this central Bangkok shopping street. Suddenly, Thailand's conflict looks a lot more dangerous. For weeks, the protest movement challenging the government has owned this street and several others in Bangkok. For the most part, the police haven't dared confront them. They have powerful backers. That has now changed, but it's not the police. There have been grenade attacks before on this movement, but targeting the guards, not ordinary people. The young boy who died here was out shopping with his family, not protesting.
I heard one loud explosion, boom. It made me run to the scene. I saw women and children lying down.
The heavy army presence is a visible reminder not only of the precarious security, but also of the military's murky role, seen as the protesters' friend and perhaps the decisive player in what happens next in Thailand. 24 hours earlier, another attack on a protest rally here in Trapp, southeastern Thailand. killed a 5-year-old girl and left several people in critical condition. No one will acknowledge carrying out these attacks, but fingers will inevitably be pointed at groups backing the government. There are militant armed wings on both sides, once kept in the shadows, but increasingly active now. Thailand is on a slide towards a civil war that no one yet seems able to stop. Jonathan Head, BBC News, Bangkok.
Thank you, Jonathan. And friends, over in Kabul, we have a report from Kabul next. The Taliban there kills Afghan troops.
Well, according to the governor of Kunar province, dozens of Taliban insurgents, including foreign fighters armed with heavy machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades, attacked this border post in the district of Ghaziabad around 4 this morning. And as a result of that, killed 20 Afghan National Army soldiers and took 7 others prisoners with them. As we speak, there's a big operation going on in at least 2 valleys, trying to recapture those soldiers that were taken captive by the insurgents, but also push the insurgents away from that valley. It's an extremely mountainous and difficult terrain. It's an area which has dense forestation, so the terrain is on the side of the insurgents. And the Afghan National Army is now saying that they will be bringing back the bodies of those soldiers tomorrow morning. There will be a ceremony in Kabul.
And friends, that was Baidal Sawari reporting from Kabul. And more violence around the world. Venezuela police and opposition activities clash in Caracas.
Another day of protests in Venezuela. Demonstrators block the streets with trash and police respond with tear gas. During the day, the protests had been more peaceful, though the huge numbers from both sides who turned out on the streets of the capital showed just how divided the country has become. More than 2 weeks in, the demonstrations are seen as the biggest test yet to the socialist leader, Nicolás Maduro, since he took power last year. Opposition leader Enrique Capriles told his supporters to carry on with the protests, but urged them to avoid violence. The opposition blames the government for food shortages, high inflation and insecurity. On the other side of the city, women marched towards the presidential palace to support Mr. Maduro, who accuses the opposition of trying to organize a coup against him.
Mujeres de la patria, si algún día por esta circunstancia.
Women of the motherland, if one day, because of this imperialist and fascist violence, one day you wake up and Nicolás Maduro is not president, will you recognize another president?
Ustedes reconocerían a otro presidente.
Mr. Maduro has been using strong language over the past few days, accusing Washington of supporting what he called fascist protesters. He has expelled U.S. diplomats, while at the same time urging U.S. President Obama to hold talks with his government. So far, the U.S. response has not satisfied Mr. Maduro, nor has it satisfied the protesters who have vowed not to leave the streets until he resigns. Irene Caselli, BBC News, Caracas.
And thank you, Irana. One of the world's most wanted drug barons, Joaquin Guzman, known as El Chapo or Shorty, has been arrested in Mexico.
After years on the run, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, perhaps the world's most wanted man, is in the hands of the authorities. Flanked by members of the security forces and dressed in dark jeans, he looked almost identical to the few images which have emerged of the elusive drug lord in recent years. Outwardly, the Mexican government kept up a cool exterior, but in the president's inner circle, the sense of excitement was palpable.
Early this morning, elements from the Navy detained Joaquin Guzman in the city of Mazatlan. Investigators from the Attorney General's office have formally identified him. He's been checked by doctors and will be transferred to the corresponding prison.
Not only is Guzman one of the most wanted drug lords in the world, he is also one of the wealthiest, amassing a personal fortune thought to be in excess of $1 billion. He was even included in the list of the world's 100 richest people in Forbes magazine. Capturing probably the biggest name in drug trafficking since Pablo Escobar is undoubtedly a massive shot in the arm for the Peña Nieto administration. But on the streets of the capital, people greeted the news of the arrest with mixed feelings.
Unlike the last government, under whom we saw many deaths on all sides, organised crime, civilians and police, now we haven't seen so many killed. I think instead they're using intelligence to locate and capture the drug lords.
Guzman is not the only boss. If they have captured him and are going to jail him, well, somebody else will take his place. Another mafia boss or drug baron.
Arresting El Chapo Guzman is a major step, both symbolically and strategically, one which the authorities hope will make an important dent in his organisation. Nevertheless, there are still important leaders of the Sinaloa cartel who are more than willing to step into Guzman's shoes.
This is not the first time that El Chapo Guzman has been captured by the Mexican authorities. According to popular myth, he escaped from a high-security prison in 2001 by hiding in a laundry basket. But this time around, the government will be doing everything in its power to ensure he doesn't slip through their fingers twice. Will Grant, BBC News, Mexico City.
Thank you, Will Grant. Friends, sometimes on Sunday nights we go a little over. Sometimes we go a whole hour. But I just have a couple more stories. We'll just go a little bit over tonight. Police and protest, and this is showing just more disturbance all around the world. Very active. Let's take a look real quick at the chart again. A very active red horse and pale horse, because the red horse, when there's internal strife, it's war, rumors of war, it's internal war within a country itself. It's also mobs and seditions, which is one of the three terms that Jesus Christ used in describing, in plain language from the gospel writers, the activities of the pale horse, which has a rider named Death, alongside whom rides Hades, hell, the grave. And we go over those often. I'll go over those another time since we're a little bit running over tonight. And with this story, police and protesters clash over a new Turkish internet law.
Fresh protests in Istanbul's central Taksim Square. People are again taking to the streets to voice their concerns over free speech. They've been calling on the country's president not to ratify a new law which would allow authorities to block websites for privacy violations without a court decision. It would also force internet providers to store data on users' activities for 2 years and make it available to the authorities. But their plea was ignored. The opposition says the government is trying to stifle a corruption scandal which broke in December. But Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan denies accusations of censorship. He says the legislation would make the internet more safe and free. But these demonstrators aren't buying his argument, and the move has been criticized by the European Union as a step back for media freedom. Marie Coy, BBC News.
Friends, have you noticed in tonight's news how many times references to things Nazi-like have occurred? There were a number of times in tonight's news. If you wanted to go back and re-watch tonight's news, just count them. You should probably find it interesting. One more story we're going to run tonight, one, maybe two more. This one further shows how man is writing the lesson in history and man's 6,000 years to govern himself, as to how he really cannot do that. He cannot govern himself without Jesus Christ, cannot govern himself well, really, and have a ultimate lasting peace where man didn't destroy mankind from off the face of the earth, or in the interim be full of all kinds of corruption. International mediators have been questioned at Spain's High Court after they helped with the partial disarmament of the Basque militant group ETA.
Members of the International Verification Commission arriving at Spain's High Court. Two of them appear in this video, passed to the BBC via an intermediary. The two masked men are members of the Basque militant separatist group ETA. The verifiers inspect weapons and explosives, a small part of ETA's arsenal that they say has been put beyond use.
Tenemos aquí el inventario.
But after announcing ETA's partial disarmament on Friday, the verifiers were summoned to court. Today, a Spanish judge questioned them as witnesses about the identity and whereabouts of the members of ETA with whom they have met in recent months.
Please, don't give them propaganda.
Ana Velasco represents the group that asked the judge to summon the verifiers to court. Her father was killed by ETA in 1980.
ETA is not only a separatist group, it's a separatist and terrorist group.
Okay, we'll end that right there with that mention about the terrorist group on that story. Friends, as we close it out tonight, I want to show you just a little bit of footage related to a story from today showing how experts are trying to fix an Amazon rainforest satellite problem, because as this footage rolls, it shows you just some very beautiful scenes of the Earth.
NASA's Terra satellite observes our planet's land, water and atmosphere from 500 miles above Earth. Its onboard instruments record seasonal changes on the planet's surface and how those changes affect our climate. But in one area of the world, the satellite has thrown up more questions than answers. For the last 10 years, scientists analysing images from Terra have noticed something unusual over the Amazon rainforest. Now, this is one of the satellite images, and it appears to show that the rainforest actually grows greener during dry seasons and droughts, when you'd expect the vegetation to die back. NASA scientists realised that the images taken from space weren't a true picture of what was happening on the ground, so they turned to Swansea University for help. Experts here specialise in studying the Earth using satellite data. They found that the greening up of the rainforest is an illusion. It's caused by sunlight hitting the ground and reflecting back to the satellite when it's focusing on the Amazon at a particular angle.
When we look very carefully at this, we find that a lot of the greening can be explained by changes in illumination, so suggesting that this past studies were really seeing an optical illusion with changing sunlight rather than something changing on the ground.
For years, scientists have been trying to understand why this ecosystem, which is so dependent on rainfall, would appear healthier during periods of drought. The answer is it doesn't, and that has very real implications for climate change.
It had been assumed until this work that the Amazon rainforest was mopping up some of the carbon dioxide that we were releasing. It's not true to the extent that most people thought, and that's really bad news. That means that carbon dioxide will stay in the atmosphere and cause increased warming.
The last few weeks have seen extreme weather conditions hit countries around the world, from snowstorms in North America to flooding closer to home. The collaboration between Swansea University and NASA casts doubt on how we've been analysing images of our planet taken from space. The true picture on the ground could be very different.
Friends, thank you for joining me for this Sunday night report of Nightcast news related to the Bible and prophecy from the current last few days news. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again Monday evening with Monday's news related to the Bible and prophecy. Until next time, your host Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth saying, so long, dear friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.